The phone rang at midnight on my wedding night, and I knew exactly who it was before my husband even answered. Nicolette, his mistress. He looked at me in my white lace gown, tears already streaming down my face, and said 5 words that destroyed everything. Do not wait up, Elowen. Then he walked out, leaving me alone in our bridal suite to comfort the woman he truly loved. And that's when I realized this wasn't just abandonment, it was war. Before we go deeper into the story, you are welcome to Empire Stories. We're building a community that refuses to accept neglect and betrayal as normal. If you believe women deserve respect, loyalty, and real love, not control disguised as protection, subscribe and help us get to 10,000 subscribers. Your support helps us spread these stories to people who need to know. They deserve better, and it's okay to walk away. Elowen Blackridge sat frozen on the edge of the bridal suite bed, her hands covering her face. The lace of her wedding gown scratched against her trembling fingers. White roses filled every corner of the room, their perfumes suffocating, mixing with the sharp cologne that still lingered from when Matteo had stood close enough to say his vows. That felt like years ago now, not hours. Behind her, she heard his footsteps, not toward her, toward the window, always away. She dropped her hands and turned. Matteo stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, his tattooed neck stark against the white collar of his shirt. The ink crawled up from beneath his jacket, disappearing into the crisp fabric like secrets he'd never share. His jaw was tight, his voice low, not the voice he used during the ceremony. Not the clipped, emotionless tone he'd used when introducing her to his lieutenants at the reception. This voice was sparkling, concerned, almost tender. I'm on my way. Stay where you are, Nicolette. I won't let anything happen to you. Elowen's breath caught. The name landed like a fist to her sternum. She'd heard whispers about Nicolette Hart, the woman who'd been at Matteo's side for years before their families brokered this marriage. The woman whose face had appeared in leaked photos from private dinners in exclusive clubs. The woman who apparently still had him on speed dial. Matteo ended the call and slipped his phone into his pocket. He turned, adjusting his cufflinks over the tattoos on his wrists with mechanical precision. His expression was stone. No apology in those cold eyes. No acknowledgement of what he was about to do to... You're leaving. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, the words catching on the lump in her throat. She had a security scare. Someone breached her apartment building. Elowen stood, her gown rustling like dying leaves. It's our wedding night. I'm aware of the date, Elowen. Then stay. She hated the pleading edge in her voice, but she couldn't stop it. Just for tonight, for appearances, if nothing else. Your men are watching. Your enemies are watching. What does it say if you leave your bride alone on? It says I have priorities. He buttoned his jacket, each movement sharp and final. Nicolette has been part of my life for 6 years. You've been my wife for 6 hours. This marriage is a title, not a life. I suggest you learn the difference quickly. Her chest tightened. She stepped forward, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. I'm your wife. You're a strategic alliance. He moved past her toward the door, not even brushing her shoulder. Your family needed protection from the Rossi syndicate. My family needed ties to your shipping routes. We both got what we needed. Don't confuse a contract with a fairy tale. She grabbed his arm. The tattoos were warm beneath her palm, the only warm thing about him. Matteo, please. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. For half a second, something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Discomfort? It vanished before she could name it. Don't wait up, he said, pulling free. And don't embarrass yourself by crying to the staff. They already know what this is. The door opened, closed. The lock clicked into place from the outside. Elowen stood in the center of the room, surrounded by roses and white silk and the remnants of vows that meant nothing. Her reflection stared back at her from the floor-length mirror, a ghost in designer lace, mascara beginning to smudge at the corners of her eyes. She pressed her palms to her face and let out a shuddering breath. Then another, her shoulders shook. The first sob tore from her throat, raw and humiliating. She sank back onto the bed, the mattress swallowing her whole, and cried into her hands like the naive girl she'd been that morning. The one who thought maybe, just maybe, Matteo Blackridge might look at her the way he looked at his empire, with something resembling care. But he'd made his choice, and she would never forget it. When the tears finally stopped, when her throat was raw and her face was numb, Elowen lifted her head. The suite was silent except for the hum of the city beyond the windows. Baltimore sprawled below, glittering and dangerous, a kingdom Mateo ruled with an iron fist. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing makeup across her skin. Then she stood, walked to the mirror, and stared at the woman looking back. This, she decided, was the last time Mateo Blackridge would ever see her cry. Sunlight filtered through the gauze curtains, soft and mocking. Elowen woke alone in the massive bed, the sheets on Mateo's side still crisp and untouched. He hadn't come back. Not at midnight, not at dawn. The space beside her was as cold as the man who owned it. She sat up slowly, her wedding gown crumpled on the floor where she'd finally torn it off at 3 a.m. The lace looked defeated in the harsh daylight, a discarded dream. She stared at it for a long moment, then stood and picked it up. The Blackridge estate sprawled across 20 acres in the Maryland countryside, a fortress disguised as a mansion. Elowen had been given a brief tour the day before the wedding, moving through marble hallways and rooms larger than her childhood home. She'd felt small then. She felt smaller now. She found the fireplace in the sitting room adjacent to their bedroom. Someone had already stocked it with wood, probably one of the silent staff members who moved through the house like shadows. Elowen knelt, struck a match, and watched the flames catch. Then she fed the wedding dress to the fire. The lace blackened and curled, the beadwork popping and hissing. Smoke rose in dark ribbons, carrying away the scent of roses and the last remnants of the girl who'd hoped for something more. She watched it burn piece by piece until there was nothing left but ash. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A maid appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tight bun. She took in the scene, the fireplace, the ashes. Elowen kneeling in her silk robe with soot on her hands, and her expression shifted. Not surprise, pity. "Mrs. Blackridge," the maid said softly, "breakfast is ready downstairs. Mr. Blackridge asked me to inform you he'll be working from his office today and won't be joining you." Of course he wouldn't. Elowen stood, brushing ash from her palms. "What's your name?" The maid hesitated. "Teresa, ma'am." "Teresa." Elowen forced her spine straight, her chin up. "From now on, when Mr. Blackridge sends messages, you can tell him I received them. But I won't be waiting for him. Not for meals, not for anything. Is that understood?" Teresa's eyes widened slightly, then softened with something like respect. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Elowen moved toward the bedroom. "I'll take breakfast in the conservatory, alone." As she closed the door behind her, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her hair was tangled, her face pale, but her eyes were different. Harder, colder. She looked like a Blackridge now, and Mateo had no idea what he'd created. The conservatory was all glass and iron, a cage disguised as beauty. Elowen sat at the small, wrought iron table, untouched toast and coffee growing cold in front of her. Beyond the windows, the estate stretched endlessly. Manicured lawns and rose gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. It should have felt like paradise. It felt like a mausoleum. She heard them before she saw them. Two maids in the hallway just outside the conservatory, their voices low but not low enough. Poor thing, all alone on her wedding night. "I heard he didn't even come back until dawn, went straight to his office without checking on her. That woman has him wrapped around her finger, always has. I don't know why he even bothered getting married." Elowen's grip tightened on her coffee cup. The porcelain was delicate, expensive, the kind of thing that could shatter with the slightest pressure. She set it down carefully before she could break it. The maids noticed her through the glass and scattered like startled birds, their faces flushing with embarrassment. But the pity in their eyes remained. Elowen stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile. She couldn't stay here, couldn't sit in this glass box while the staff whispered about her humiliation. She moved through the hallways with purpose, her silk robe trailing behind her like a ghost. The house was a labyrinth of wealth and cold elegance, every surface polished to perfection, every corner monitored by cameras she'd been told were for security. They felt like eyes watching her fall apart. She found herself back in the bedroom suite. The bed was made now, the sheets crisp and white. erasing any evidence that she'd spent the night sobbing into them. Someone had even opened the windows, letting in fresh air to chase away the lingering scent of roses and cologne. But the wedding dress still lay where she'd left it, a crumpled heap of lace and broken dreams on the floor near the closet. Elwyn picked it up, the fabric heavy in her hands. Custom-made, imported lace from Italy, seed pearls sewn by hand. Her mother had cried when she first saw it, said she looked like an angel. Matteo hadn't even looked at her during the ceremony, his eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder, already thinking about his next move, his next deal, his next obligation, his next woman. She carried the dress to the sitting room, to the fireplace where embers still glowed from earlier. Someone had added more wood while she was at breakfast, probably expecting her to want warmth. She did want warmth, just not the kind they thought. Eloan knelt and fed the first sleeve into the flames. The lace caught immediately, blackening and curling, the delicate threadwork disintegrating into ash. She pushed more of the fabric in, watching the pearls pop and hiss, tiny explosions of heat. The bodice went next, then the train, the veil, every piece of the costume she'd worn to play the role of blushing bride. Smoke filled the room, thick and acrid. She didn't move, didn't cough, just watched the dress burn until there was nothing left but charred remnants and the faint glow of dying embers. Behind her, the door opened. Teresa stood frozen in the doorway, her arms full of fresh linens, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The burning dress, the ash-stained marble, Eloan kneeling in her robe with soot streaked across her hands like war paint. "Mrs. Blackridge, is there something you need, Teresa?" Eloan's voice was steady, calm. Nothing like the sobbing girl from last night. Teresa's mouth opened, closed. The pity that had been in her eyes earlier was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Or respect. Maybe both. "Mr. Blackridge asked me to tell you he'll be working late tonight. He said not to wait for him at dinner." Of course he did. Eloan stood, brushing ash from her palms onto her robe. She met Teresa's eyes without flinching. "You can tell Mr. Blackridge that I wasn't planning to wait. In fact, from now on, he can assume I won't be waiting for him at all. Not for dinner, not for anything." Teresa nodded slowly, her grip tightening on the linens. "Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else you need?" "Yes." Eloan walked past her toward the bathroom, leaving sooty footprints on the pristine white carpet. "Have someone dispose of what's left in the fireplace. And Teresa, if anyone asks about the dress, tell them it was an accident. A spark caught the fabric. These things happen in old houses." Teresa's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "Of course, Mrs. Blackridge. Just an accident. What do you think happens when a man realizes the woman he discarded is no longer breakable? Drop a comment below." As the door closed, Eloan caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was streaked with ash and dried tears, her hair tangled, her eyes red-rimmed. But beneath the mess, something else stared back at her, something harder, colder. The girl who'd walked down the aisle yesterday was dead, burned away with the dress. What rose from those ashes was something Matteo Blackridge hadn't bargained for. A queen who'd learned her first lesson in surviving his world. Never let them see you break twice. 3 days passed in cold silence. Eloan didn't see Matteo except in glimpses, his shadow disappearing around corners, his voice barking orders behind closed doors. She took her meals alone, walked the estate grounds alone, learned the rhythm of a house that operated like a machine. The staff stopped giving her pitying looks. Now they watched her with cautious curiosity, waiting to see what the new Mrs. Blackridge would become. On the 4th morning, she was reading in the library when Teresa appeared in the doorway, her face tight with discomfort. "Mrs. Blackridge, Mr. Blackridge asked me to inform you that there will be a guest staying in the East Cottage for security purposes." Eloan closed her book. The East Cottage sat at the far edge of the property, hidden by oak trees and a wall of hedges. She'd walked past it once. It was small by estate standards, but still larger than most homes, with its own entrance and complete privacy from the main house. "What kind of security purposes?" Teresa hesitated. "A personal matter, ma'am. He said you shouldn't concern yourself." Of course he did. Elowen stood, smoothing her black cashmere dress. When is this guest arriving? She's already here, ma'am. She. The word hung in the air like poison. Elowen found Mateo near the East Cottage 20 minutes later, standing beside a black SUV with two of his men. He was dressed in dark slacks and a fitted shirt, his tattoos visible at his collar and wrists, his expression all business. He didn't notice her approaching until she was 10 feet away. Elowen, his voice was clipped. You didn't need to come out here. I live here, she said evenly. I should know who's on the property. Before he could respond, the cottage door opened. A woman stepped out into the small porch, and Elowen's breath caught. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women managed, long auburn hair falling in waves over a cream silk blouse, designer jeans hugging curves that looked camera-ready. But it was her face that stopped Elowen cold. The way she looked at Mateo, all wide eyes and trembling lips, like a damsel who'd barely survived some terrible ordeal. Mateo, the woman breathed, descending the steps. Thank you for letting me stay here. I just didn't feel safe after. She stopped when she noticed Elowen, her expression shifting to something that might have been embarrassing if it weren't so perfectly performed. Oh, you must be Elowen. Nicolette, Mateo's voice softened in that way Elowen recognized from their wedding night. This is my wife, Elowen Blackridge. I've heard so much about you. Nicolette offered a delicate hand, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I'm so sorry to intrude like this. I know it must be awkward, but Mateo insisted I'd be safer here until they catch whoever broke into my building. Elowen took her hand briefly. Nicolette's grip was limp, practiced. Everything about her screamed helplessness, from the slight shake in her voice to the way she kept glancing at Mateo for reassurance. It was a performance, and Mateo was eating it up. How frightening, Elowen said, her tone neutral. Did they take anything? Nicolette blinked. I'm sorry? The intruder. Did they steal anything, or were they just looking around? A flicker of something crossed Nicolette's face. Annoyance? She recovered quickly. They didn't take anything. That's what scared me most. It felt targeted. Targeted. Elowen tilted her head slightly. Have you reported this to the police? The police can't help with this kind of thing. Mateo stepped closer to Nicolette, his posture protective. This is connected to my world, which means it's my responsibility to handle. Nicolette stays here until I'm certain she's safe. Elowen watched the way Nicolette leaned into him, just slightly, the way her hand brushed his arm, the way she looked up at him like he was the only thing standing between her and certain death, and the way Mateo responded, his jaw set, his eyes hard with determination to protect her. It was all so obvious, so transparent, and Mateo couldn't see it. How long will she be staying? Elowen asked. As long as necessary. I see. Elowen's gaze moved to Nicolette, who was watching her with barely concealed triumph behind those wide, innocent eyes. Well then, Nicolette, I hope you find the cottage comfortable. If you need anything, I'm sure Mateo will make sure you're taken care of. She turned and walked back toward the main house, her heels clicking against the stone path. Behind her, she heard Nicolette's voice, soft and grateful, thanking Mateo for everything. Heard him murmur something reassuring in response. If you see the manipulation but the person you care about doesn't, hit the like button. You're not alone, Juan. Back inside, Elowen stood at the window of her suite, watching the cottage in the distance. Watching Mateo linger at Nicolette's door, his body language all concern and protection. Watching the other woman smile up at him before disappearing inside, leaving Mateo staring after her like she was something precious. Elowen's reflection stared back at her from the glass, and she barely recognized herself. Good. The girl who would have cried was gone. The woman who remained understood exactly what she was dealing with. Nicolette Hart wasn't a victim seeking protection. She was a predator marking her territory. And Mateo was too blind to see that the real threat wasn't outside the gates. It was already inside. The transformation happened gradually, then all at once. Elowen stopped waiting for Mateo to acknowledge her existence. She stopped asking questions about his schedule, stopped looking for him at meals, stopped pretending their marriage was anything more than a business arrangement. If he wanted a wife in name only, she'd give him exactly that, nothing more, nothing less. She threw herself into the role of Mrs. Blackridge with calculated precision. The charity galas and fundraisers that came with being a mafia don's wife became her battlefield. She studied every family, every alliance, every subtle power play in Baltimore's underworld. She learned which families were loyal, which were wavering, and which were waiting for any sign of weakness to strike. The Valentino Charity Gala was her first real test, a glittering affair at the Baltimore Harbor Hotel, 200 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits, all of them predators in elegant clothing. Mateo had told her that morning he'd be bringing Nicolette as extra security detail, which was code for he'd be spending the evening protecting his mistress while his wife played dress-up. Elowen arrived alone, draped in a blood-red gown that hugged every curve before flowing to the floor. Her hair was swept up, her makeup dramatic, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. The room went quiet when she entered. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, because she walked in like she owned every inch of marble beneath her feet. She found Mateo within minutes. He stood near the bar with Nicolette clinging to his arm, her pale pink dress a stark contrast to the darkness he wore like armor. His eyes found Elowen across the room, and something flickered in them. Surprise? Anger? She didn't care enough to analyze it. Mrs. Blackridge. Giovanni Russo materialized at her elbow, all silver hair and dangerous charm. He was an old guard, one of the most powerful bosses in the tri-state area, and not someone most people approached without careful consideration. You look radiant this evening. Mr. Russo. She accepted his offered hand with perfect grace. I was hoping to speak with you about the waterfront development project. His eyebrows rose. You're interested in business? I'm a Blackridge now. Everything is business. He laughed, a sound like rolling thunder. Your husband is a lucky man. Come. Let me introduce you to some associates. The next hour passed in a blur of handshakes and strategic conversation. Elowen moved through the room like she'd been born to it, discussing shipping routes with Dominic Castellano, jockeying about territory disputes with Marcus Petrov, offering insights on money laundering regulations with Antonio Greco. The men watched her with a mixture of respect and wariness, realizing too late that Mateo's quiet wife was anything but decoration. Across the room, Mateo's jaw was tight. She could feel his eyes on her, tracking her movements, watching her laugh at something Giovanni said, watching the older man's hand rest lightly on her lower back as he guided her toward another group. Your wife is quite impressive. Dominic Castellano appeared beside Mateo, his tone carefully neutral. Smart, charming, and she actually understands the business. You're a fortunate man, Blackridge. Mateo's grip tightened on his glass. She's doing fine. Fine? Dominic chuckled. She's making allies faster than you did your first year. Half the room is reconsidering their opinion of your organization based on her alone. He paused. Though I'm surprised you let her work the Russo solo, Russo's been monopolizing her attention. Something dark crossed Mateo's face. He downed his whiskey and set the glass on the bar with enough force to crack it. Without a word, he crossed the room toward Elowen, leaving Nicolette standing alone with a confused expression. Elowen was mid-conversation with Giovanni when she felt Mateo's presence behind her. His hand wrapped around her waist, possessive and firm, pulling her against his side. Russo. His voice was all cold authority. I need to steal my wife for a moment. Giovanni's eyes sparkled with amusement. Of course. Mrs. Blackridge, we'll continue our discussion later. Mateo guided her toward the balcony, his fingers digging into her hip. The night air was cool, a relief from the suffocating heat of the ballroom. The moment they were alone, he released her and stepped back. What the hell are you doing? His voice was low, dangerous. Elowen turned to face him, her expression serene. I'm networking. Isn't that what you wanted? A wife who could handle appearances? You're making alliances without consulting me. You weren't available for consultation. You were busy. She glanced through the glass doors at Nicolette, who was watching them with poorly concealed irritation. With more important matters. Russo had his hands on you. He was being polite. He was staking a claim. Mateo stepped closer, his tattoos stark in the moonlight. You're my wife, Elowen. That means something in this world. She met his eyes without flinching. Does it? Because for the past month, I've been living in your house like a ghost while you play savior to another woman. You made it clear what this marriage is, Mateo, a title, not a life. So I'm building a life around the title. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should have thought about that before abandoning me on our wedding night. When did you realize Elowen had become the one with all the power? His jaw clenched. For a long moment they stood in tense silence, the sounds of the gala muffled behind glass. Then he said, voice rough, "Stay away from Russo. He's not to be trusted." "Then I'll be careful." She moved past him toward the door. "Unlike some people, I know how to spot manipulation when I see it." She left him standing on the balcony, his hands clenched into fists, watching her disappear back into the crowd where Giovanni Russo waited with an approving smile. 6 weeks. That's how long they'd been married when their first month anniversary came around. Elowen didn't expect Mateo to remember or care, but Teresa had mentioned that morning that he'd made a reservation at Vermilion, the most exclusive restaurant in Baltimore, a place where reservations were booked months in advance, where senators and CEOs went to be seen. Elowen dressed carefully that evening, choosing a fitted emerald dress that made her look like old money and new power. She arrived at the restaurant at 8 sharp, was shown to a private table overlooking the harbor, and ordered a glass of wine while she waited. 8:15, 8:30, 8:45. The waiter returned, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, would you like to order an appetizer while you wait?" "No, thank you." She took another sip of wine, her phone face up on the table. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. At 9:15, her phone finally buzzed. Not a call, a text. "Can't make it." Something came up with Nicolette. "Don't wait." Elowen stared at the message for a long moment. Around her, couples laughed over candlelight. Servers moved like synchronized dancers. The whole restaurant humming with the energy of people celebrating something worth celebrating. She set her phone down, finished her wine in one long swallow, and signaled the waiter. "Check, please." "But ma'am, you haven't ordered." "Just the wine." She handed him her card, tipped generously, and left without looking back. The drive home was silent except for the sound of her own breathing. She wasn't crying, wasn't angry. She was empty, which somehow felt worse. The gates of the estate swung open automatically, and she parked near the main entrance, taking her time walking to the door. Inside, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. She was halfway up the stairs when she heard the front door open behind her. "Elowen!" She stopped, hand on the railing, but didn't turn around. Mateo's footsteps echoed on the marble. "I'm sorry about dinner." Nicolette had a panic attack. She thought someone was watching the cottage. "I had to." Elowen laughed. It started as a small sound, almost a chuckle, then grew into something fuller, richer. She turned on the stairs, looking down at him, standing in the foyer, still in his jacket, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked confused, which only made her laugh harder. "What's so funny?" His voice was sharp, defensive. "You." She descended 2 steps, her eyes bright with amusement that didn't reach the cold depths beneath. "You're so predictable, it's almost sad." Someone was watching the cottage. Let me guess, she saw shadows, heard footsteps? Or maybe this time it was a suspicious car parked down the road? His jaw tightened. There are real threats. There are always threats when it's convenient for her. Elowen descended another step, and Mateo took an involuntary step back. "Tell me, does she call you before or after you make plans with other people? Or does she just have a sixth sense for when you might actually be spending time with your wife?" "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." She reached the bottom of the stairs, standing eye level with him now. "You're being played, Mateo, like a violin. And the truly hilarious part is that you think you're being noble, the big, strong protector running to save the damsel in distress." She circled him slowly, her heels clicking against the floor. "It would be romantic if it weren't so pathetic." Color rose in his face. "Watch yourself." "Or what?" She stopped in front of him, tilting her head. "You'll leave me alone in a restaurant on our anniversary?" "Oh, wait, you already did that. Maybe you'll ignore me for weeks while you play house with your mistress?" "Already doing that, too." "Face it, Mateo, you've run out of ways to hurt me because I simply don't care anymore." I was protecting her. You were being manipulated. Elowen's voice dropped to something almost pitying. And the worst part? Everyone sees it except you. Your men whisper about it. The other families laugh about it. Giovanni Russo asked me at the gala if you always choose your mistress over business, or if that's a new development. Do you know how humiliating it was to have no answer? Matteo's hands clenched at his sides. That's not. Save it. She moved toward the stairs, then paused. You know what the real joke is? I actually got dressed up tonight, put on makeup, showed up early, like some naive little girl who still believed her husband might actually want to spend time with her. She looked back at him, and the smile on her face was sharp enough to cut. Thank you for curing me of that particular delusion. Elowen, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. Go back to your cottage. Go comfort Nicolette through her latest crisis. I'm sure she's waiting for you with some new emergency that only you can solve. Maybe the curtains are the wrong color this time. Maybe she stubbed her toe. The possibilities are endless. She climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately, leaving him standing in the foyer. She could feel his eyes on her back, could sense the fury and confusion radiating off him in waves. Good. Let him feel something other than devotion to a woman who was bleeding him dry. At the top of the stairs, she stopped and looked down at him one last time. By the way, Matteo, next time you make a reservation somewhere, don't. I'd rather eat alone than wait for a man who can't tell the difference between protection and manipulation. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. I made a commitment to keep her safe, and you made a commitment to me. She met his eyes across the distance. But I suppose some vows matter more than others. She disappeared into her suite and closed the door, leaning against it as she heard him standing in the hallway, heard his frustrated exhale, heard his footsteps retreat. Only then did she allow herself a real smile, because for the first time since their wedding night, she'd seen something in Matteo Blackridge's eyes that wasn't cold indifference. She'd seen shame. You're absolutely right. I apologize. I updated the artifact but didn't post Chapter 5 in the thread. Here it is. The first crack in Matteo's certainty came 3 days later. He was reviewing security footage from the cottage perimeter, something he did routinely after each of Nicolette's incidents. The timestamp on the night she'd claimed someone was watching showed nothing. No cars, no shadows, no movement except a stray cat at 2 in the morning. He rewound it twice, checking different angles. Still nothing. Boss, his lieutenant Kane appeared in the doorway of his office. We've got a situation with the Petrov shipment. They're claiming short count on the delivery. Matteo looked up from the screens. How short? 20 kilos. They're threatening to pull out of the partnership. He stopped himself. He'd been about to ask where Elowen was, which made no sense. This was his business, not hers. Get Dominic on the phone. We'll sort this out. Already tried. He won't talk to me. Says he'll only speak with Mrs. Blackridge. Matteo's jaw tightened. What? She handled some issue with his wife last week at that charity thing. He said, and I quote, your wife has more sense in her little finger than your entire organization. He wants her at the meeting. For a moment, Matteo considered refusing. Then he remembered Giovanni Russo's words at the gala, the way the other families had started looking at Elowen with respect, the way his own men had stopped giving her pitying looks and started stepping aside when she walked past. Fine, tell Petrov we'll be there in an hour, both of us. He found Elowen in the conservatory reading a book on international shipping law. She looked up when he entered, her expression neutral. We have a meeting with the Petrovs. There's a discrepancy in a shipment. He'll only speak with you. She marked her page and stood. What kind of discrepancy? 20 kilos short on a weapons delivery. And you're certain you sent the full count? My men counted 3 times. Then either someone in your organization is skimming or Petrov is lying to renegotiate terms. She moved past him toward the door. Give me 10 minutes to change. She returned in a tailored black suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the mafia queen she'd become. In the car, she was silent, reviewing files on her phone that Matteo hadn't even known she had access to. When had she gotten into his business records? And who had given her clearance? The Petrov estate was a fortress in the hills outside Baltimore. Marcus Petrov met them in his study, a mountain of a man with cold blue eyes and a reputation for crushing anyone who crossed him. Blackridge. He barely glanced at Mateo, his attention fixed on Elowen. Mrs. Blackridge, thank you for coming. Mr. Petrov. Elowen settled into the chair across from his desk like she owned it. I understand there's a concern about the shipment weight. 20 kilos missing. We had an independent witness verify the count on our end. And the seal on the container? Petrov's eyebrows rose slightly. Intact. So the shortage happened before sealing, which means the issue is on our end. She pulled out her phone, swiped through something, then turned it toward him. These are the weight receipts from our warehouse, time-stamped and verified by 3 separate team members. Full count, which means either your independent witness made an error or someone in your organization removed the merchandise after delivery and blamed us to avoid internal consequences. The room went very quiet. Mateo watched Petrov's face carefully, noting the slight tightening around his eyes. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Blackridge. It's a logical conclusion based on the evidence. Her voice was calm, unbothered. But I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to solve the problem. We'll do a joint recount with representatives from both families present. If we're short, we replace it at no cost and investigate our own people. If the count is accurate, you handle your internal issue however you see fit. Either way, the partnership continues. Petrov studied her for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. Your wife is wasted on you, Blackridge. Mateo's fist clenched under the table. We'll do the recount. Petrov stood, extending his hand to Elowen. And Mrs. Blackridge, if you ever decide you want to run your own operation, I know several families who would back you. The recount proved Elowen right. One of Petrov's new lieutenants had been skimming, assuming the shortage would be blamed on the supplier. Petrov dealt with him swiftly and privately, and the partnership remained intact. On the drive home, Mateo couldn't stop replaying the meeting in his head. The way Elowen had commanded the room, the respect in Petrov's eyes, the casual competence she'd displayed like she'd been born to this life. When did you get access to my business files? He finally asked. I asked Kane for them 2 weeks ago. He gave me read-only access. Kane reports to me. And yet he gave me access anyway. She looked out the window. Maybe he recognized that having an informed wife is better than an ornamental one. Mateo's phone buzzed, a text from Nicolette. Can you come by tonight? I'm scared. He stared at the message, then at Elowen beside him, already back to reading her files. He thought about the security footage that showed nothing, about the way Nicolette always seemed to have a crisis right when he had other plans, about Elowen asking at the restaurant if Nicolette had a sixth sense for his schedule. He typed back, I'll send Kane to check on you. I have business to handle. For the first time in 6 years, he didn't drop everything to run to Nicolette's side, and the guilt he expected to feel never came. Instead, he felt something else entirely, relief. You handled that well today, he said quietly. Elowen glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it. Thank you. Where did you learn to negotiate like that? I've been watching you. Her smile was sharp. I've been watching everyone. That's what happens when you have nothing else to do but observe. The words landed like a punch, because she was right. While he'd been playing hero to Nicolette, Elowen had been studying, learning, becoming something formidable. And he'd been too blind to notice until other men started pointing it out. His phone buzzed again. Nicolette calling this time. He declined it and put the phone in his pocket. Beside him, Elowen's eyebrow raised slightly, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The message was clear enough. Something was shifting, and Mateo wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next. Elowen hadn't planned to go to the cottage. She'd been walking the estate grounds, needing air after another tense dinner where Mateo actually showed up but said nothing. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the oak trees, and her path naturally curved toward the eastern edge of the property. The cottage lights were on. Through the window, she could see Nicolette moving around inside, phone pressed to her ear, her expression animated in a way it never was around Mateo. Elowen should have turned back, should have minded her own business, but something about the scene felt wrong. She moved closer, staying in the shadows of the trees. Nicolette was laughing, gesturing with her free hand, completely at ease. Not the trembling damsel who needed protection, not the frightened woman who jumped at shadows. This was someone comfortable, confident, almost smug. Nicolette ended the call and set her phone on the kitchen counter. Then she pulled another phone from her purse. A second phone. She typed something quickly, her face illuminated by the screen's glow, then tucked it back into her bag before grabbing a bottle of wine from the fridge. Elowen's pulse quickened. A burner phone. Why would someone supposedly hiding from threats need a burner phone? She waited until Nicolette disappeared into the bedroom, then made her decision. The cottage had a security code, but Teresa had mentioned it once in passing. Something about checking on maintenance. Elowen punched in the numbers, and the lock clicked open. Inside, the cottage smelled like expensive perfume and wine. Nicolette's purse sat on the kitchen counter where she'd left it, designer leather, probably a gift from Mateo. Elowen's hands were steady as she opened it, pushing aside lipstick and keys until her fingers closed around the phone. It was cheap, disposable, the kind you bought with cash and threw away. She powered it on, and the screen lit up with a string of recent messages. No names, just numbers. Shipment schedule confirmed for Thursday. Harbor Warehouse. 2 a.m. Black Ridge meeting, Petrov tomorrow. Location, Petrov Estate. Security or rotation changes every 6 hours. East Gate is weakest. Elowen's blood ran cold. Each message was time-stamped, dated, spanning back weeks. Information that only someone inside the Black Ridge organization would know. Details about shipments, meetings, security protocols, and every message had been sent to the same number. She scrolled further, found a reply. Good work. Your payment is ready. When you deliver the wife, you'll get the rest. Deliver the wife. The bedroom door opened. Elowen looked up to find Nicolette frozen in the doorway, her face draining of color as she saw the burner phone in Elowen's hands. That's not, Nicolette started, but her voice died when their eyes met. Not what? Elowen's voice was ice. Not evidence that you've been selling information to rival families? Not proof that every crisis you've had was manufactured to keep Mateo distracted, while you fed intelligence to his enemies? Nicolette's expression shifted, the helpless facade cracking to reveal something harder underneath. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. Elowen held up the phone. You've been playing him from the beginning. The break-ins, the panic attacks, the security scares, all of it was theater to keep him close while you bled his organization dry. He owed me. Nicolette's voice turned sharp, bitter. 6 years I gave him. 6 years of being his secret, his hidden thing while he built his empire. Then he married you for some alliance with your family, and I was supposed to just accept it? So you decided to destroy him instead? I decided to get what I'm owed. Nicolette moved closer, her eyes calculating. Those families are offering me more money than Mateo ever did. A new life, new identity, and all I have to do is give them you, his precious wife. The one thing that might actually make him vulnerable. Elowen's grip tightened on the phone. When? Tomorrow night. They're planning to take you from the estate during the charity auction. Mateo will be occupied with the guests, security will be spread thin. They grab you, blame it on a rival family, and Mateo tears himself apart looking in the wrong direction while they dismantle his operation piece by piece. Nicolette smiled, and it was ugly. And I'd disappear with enough money to live like a queen. You're willing to have me killed for a payout? You? Nicolette laughed. You were just convenient. You could have been anyone. Mateo doesn't care about you anyway. He made that clear on your wedding night. The words should have hurt. A month ago, they would have destroyed her. But Elowen had burned that girl away in the fireplace with her wedding dress. You're right, Elowen said quietly. He doesn't care about me, but he cares about his empire. And you've just threatened that. She pulled out her own phone and held it up. The screen showed a recording app, the timer still running, capturing every word of their conversation. Nicolette's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Elowen stopped the recording and slipped her phone into her pocket. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay in this cottage tonight. You're not going to call anyone or warn anyone. And tomorrow, you're going to let those men come for me, exactly as planned. Why would you? Because Matteo needs to see what you really are. And I need him to understand that the biggest threat to his empire has been sleeping in his guest cottage. Elowen moved toward the door, still holding the burner phone. Besides, I have no intention of actually being taken. But they don't know that yet. He'll kill me. Nicolette's voice shook now, the confident mask finally crumbling. When he finds out, he'll kill me. Then you should have chosen better allies. Elowen opened the door, the cool night air rushing in. You wanted to play in the mafia world, Nicolette. Now you get to learn what happens when you lose. She walked out, leaving Nicolette standing in the cottage, trapped by her own web of lies. The burner phone felt heavy in her pocket, its weight carrying the evidence of betrayal that would shatter whatever remained of Matteo's illusions. Tomorrow night would change everything, and for the first time since her wedding night, Elowen wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The charity auction was in full swing by 7 that evening. The estate's grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns, 200 of Baltimore's elite mingling over champagne and carefully veiled threats. Elowen stood near the silent auction table, cataloging exits and security positions with the same precision she'd used to study shipping routes. She'd spent the morning preparing. The burner phone was hidden in her study, the recording backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts. She'd written everything down in a sealed letter and left it with Teresa, with instructions to give it to Kane if anything happened to her. She'd even mapped out the most likely extraction points if things went wrong. What she hadn't done was tell Matteo, not yet, because she needed him to see it happen, needed him to understand the full scope of Nicolette's betrayal, not just hear about it secondhand. Words could be dismissed. Evidence could be questioned. But watching his wife get taken because of his mistress's treachery, that would burn into his soul forever. Matteo was across the room discussing territory agreements with Giovanni Russo. He'd been different since yesterday, more present, actually looking at her when she spoke. It was too little, too late, but she noted it anyway. Nicolette was conspicuously absent from the event, playing her role perfectly. Mrs. Blackridge, a waiter appeared at her elbow with a tray of champagne. Young, unfamiliar face, eyes that lingered too long. Compliments of Mr. Russo. Elowen took the glass, noting how the waiter's hand shook slightly. I don't believe I've seen you on staff before. New hire, ma'am, for the evening. She set the glass down untouched. Tell Mr. Russo I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not drinking tonight. The waiter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Elowen's pulse quickened. That was attempt 1. They'd try something else. She moved toward the terrace doors, needing air that wasn't thick with perfume and lies. The night was cool, the gardens beyond lit with decorative lanterns. She was halfway across the terrace when she heard the scream from inside. Fire! There's a fire in the kitchen! Chaos erupted. Guests rushed toward the exits, staff scrambled with extinguishers, and security mobilized to evacuate the ballroom. Elowen turned back toward the doors, but someone grabbed her arm. Mrs. Blackridge, this way. Kane sent me to get you to safety. The man was wearing a Blackridge security uniform, but she didn't recognize him. His grip was too tight, his smile too practiced. Behind him, 2 more men in identical uniforms materialized from the garden shadows. Kane didn't send you, she said calmly. His smile vanished. Smart girl. Doesn't matter. You're coming with us anyway. She tried to pull free, but the second man was already behind her, something pressed against her lower back. Not a gun, a taser. She felt the electricity surge through her body, turning her muscles to liquid, stealing her voice. She collapsed, and strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Careful with her. Boss wants her alive. They carried her through the gardens, away from the manufactured chaos, toward the east gate where a black van waited with its engine running. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The taser had left her helpless. Inside the ballroom, through the terrace doors, she could see Matteo scanning the crowd, looking for her. His face shifted from confusion to alarm as he realized she wasn't there. He said something to Kane, gesturing toward the terrace. Too late. They were already lifting her into the van. The last thing she saw before the doors slammed shut was Matteo bursting through the terrace doors, his gun drawn, his eyes wild. He saw the van, saw her through the window. Their eyes met for one brief second, and she saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Pure terror. Then the van was moving, tires squealing as it raced toward the estate gates. Through the back window, she watched Mateo running after them, watched him raise his gun and fire at the tires. One shot connected, but the van didn't stop. Watched him scream something she couldn't hear, his face twisted with rage and fear. Watched the estate disappear behind them as darkness swallowed everything whole. One of the men grabbed her phone and crushed it under his boot. No tracking. Boss's orders. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Blackridge saw us. He's going to come hard. Let him. By the time he figures out where we took her, the exchange will be done. We get our payment, the Rossi family gets their leverage, and Nicolette gets her money. What about the girl? The man looked down at Elowen, still paralyzed on the van floor. She's not our problem after tonight. Elowen's mind was screaming even though her body wouldn't move. She'd planned for this, anticipated it, but she'd underestimated how quickly they'd act, how thoroughly they'd disable her. The recording was safe. The evidence was preserved. But if Mateo didn't find her in time, none of it would matter. The van turned sharply, throwing her against the side panel. Pain bloomed in her shoulder, but she couldn't cry out, could barely breathe. She focused on staying conscious, on memorizing every turn, every sound, anything that might help if she got the chance to escape. If Mateo got the chance to find her, the man who'd grabbed her pulled out a phone. Target secured, en route to the warehouse. ETA 15 minutes. A muffled voice responded, and he smiled. Yeah, she's perfect. Blackridge is going to tear this city apart looking for her. He ended the call and looked down at Elowen again. You know what's funny? Your husband chose the wrong woman. Nicolette played him for years, and he never saw it. But you're the one he's probably going to die trying to save. The irony wasn't lost on her. The wife he'd abandoned, the woman he'd treated like a business transaction, was now the one thing that might finally make Mateo Blackridge feel something real. She just hoped she'd survive long enough to see it. Mateo tore through the cottage like a hurricane. He'd watched the van disappear into the night, had emptied his clip, trying to stop it, and the sound of Elowen's name dying on his lips still echoed in his ears. Kane had the entire security team mobilizing, but Mateo needed answers first. Nicolette's cottage door splintered under his boot. She was sitting on the couch, wineglass in hand, looking far too calm for someone whose supposed protector had just lost his wife to a kidnapping. Mateo, what? Where is she? His gun was in her face before she could finish. Where did they take Elowen? Nicolette's mask of innocence faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't! His voice was lethal. Don't insult me right now. Elowen was taken from my estate during an event you conveniently weren't attending. The same night you've been making calls on a phone I didn't give you. Her face went pale. How did you... Tell me where she is, or I paint these walls with your blood. You won't shoot me. You never could. He fired. The bullet tore through the couch inches from her head, stuffing exploding into the air. Nicolette screamed, wineglass shattering on the floor. That was a warning. The next one goes through your knee, then the other knee. Then we get creative. He stepped closer, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something that made her understand she'd miscalculated fatally. Where is my wife? Rossi Warehouse, the old one by the harbor. The words tumbled out in a panic. They're holding her there until the exchange. Mateo, please, I didn't have a choice. You had 6 years of choices. You chose wrong every single time. Kane appeared in the doorway. Boss, Teresa gave me this, said Mrs. Blackridge left instructions. He handed Mateo a sealed envelope. Mateo tore it open. Inside was a letter in Elowen's precise handwriting, detailing everything. The burner phone, the messages to rival families, the planned kidnapping, screenshots of conversations, a recording file, every piece of Nicolette's betrayal laid out with surgical precision. At the bottom, one line. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I needed you to see it for yourself. Come find me. His hands shook as he read it. While he'd been playing protector to a traitor, Elowen had been protecting him, had been 3 steps ahead, gathering evidence, preparing for this exact moment. She'd known she'd be taken, had walked into it anyway because she needed him to understand the truth. He looked at Nicolette, and what she saw in his face made her start crying. "Mateo, please. I loved you. I just wanted... You wanted money." His voice was dead. "You sold information that got my men killed. You sold my wife to my enemies. And you did it all while I fed you, protected you, kept you safe." He lowered the gun. "Kane, get her out of my sight. Put her on a boat to the Kozlov territory. No money, no protection, no phone. Let her explain to them how she's been playing both sides." Kane's eyes widened. The Kozlov family didn't forgive traitors. They made examples of them. "Boss, that's a mercy compared to what she deserves." Mateo turned his back on Nicoletta's pleading. "I want 15 men, full tactical gear. We hit the warehouse in 20 minutes. The Rossi family will have at least 30 men there. Then we kill 30 men." Mateo was already moving, checking his weapons, his mind cold and focused. "No negotiations, no mercy. Anyone between me and Elowen dies. I don't care whose family they belong to." The warehouse district was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken concrete. Mateo's convoy stopped 3 blocks out, lights off, engines purring. Through binoculars, he could see the Rossi warehouse lit up like Christmas, guards posted at every entrance. "Back entrance has 4 men, Kane reported. "Front has 6. At least 20 more inside by our count. We go through the back, fast and quiet until we find her. Then we burn everything." They moved like shadows. Mateo's first 2 shots were headshots, guards dropping before they could radio. Kane's team eliminated the others with practiced efficiency. The back door gave way to a storage area filled with crates and shadows. Then they heard her scream. Mateo's blood turned to ice. He didn't think, just moved, crashing through the warehouse toward the sound. A guard appeared around a corner, and Mateo put 3 bullets in his chest without breaking stride. Another tried to raise his weapon, and Kane took him down from behind. The warehouse opened into a large central area. Elowen was bound to a chair in the center, face bloodied, dress torn. A man in an expensive suit stood behind her with a knife to her throat. 10 more guards surrounded them in a defensive circle. "Blackridge," the man smiled. "Right on time. Lower your weapons or your pretty wife gets..." Mateo shot him through the head. Chaos erupted. His men opened fire, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like lightning. Bodies dropped. Someone threw a grenade. The explosion shook the building, sent crates tumbling, turned the air thick with smoke and screaming. Mateo moved through it like death itself. A guard came at him from the left, and he broke the man's neck with his bare hands. Another fired and missed, and Mateo emptied half a clip into him. Nothing mattered except reaching Elowen. She was trying to stand, still bound to the chair, when a Rossi soldier grabbed her from behind. Mateo didn't have a clear shot, didn't need one. He closed the distance in seconds, caught the man's gun hand, and twisted until bone snapped. The soldier screamed. Mateo silenced him permanently. "Elowen!" He cut through her bindings, his hands shaking as he pulled her up. "Are you hurt? Did they..." "I'm fine." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Mateo, behind you." He spun and fired. The last Rossi guard collapsed. The warehouse fell silent except for the groaning of the wounded and the crackle of flames from the grenade blast. Kane appeared through the smoke. "All clear, boss. Rossi family is finished." Mateo barely heard him. He was staring at Elowen, at the blood on her face, the bruises forming on her wrists. On the way, she was looking at him like she'd never expected him to come at all. "You left me evidence," he said quietly. "You knew this would happen. I needed you to see what she was." Elowen's voice cracked. "I needed you to finally see me." He pulled her against him, felt her trembling despite her strong facade. "I see you. God help me, Elowen. I see you." 3 days after the warehouse, Elowen stood in her suite surrounded by packed luggage. Her hands were steady as she folded the last of her clothes, despite the bruises still visible on her wrists, despite the cut on her lip that was just beginning to heal. Teresa had cried when Elowen told her she was leaving. Kane had offered to drive her wherever she needed to go, no questions asked. Mateo hadn't said a word. He'd been a ghost in his own house, locked in his office making calls, handling the fallout from decimating the Rossi family, cleaning up the mess that Nicolette had made. The cottage sat empty now, a shell of lies and betrayal. Elowen hadn't asked what happened to her. Didn't care. She heard his footsteps in the hallway before he knocked. 3 soft raps, almost hesitant. So unlike him. Come in. Mateo opened the door and stopped cold when he saw the suitcases. His face, already haggard from 3 sleepless nights, crumbled. You're leaving? Yes. She didn't look at him, just continued folding. My family's estate in Virginia is ready. I'll stay there until we figure out the divorce terms. Divorce, he said the word like it was a foreign language. That's what this was always supposed to be, wasn't it? A business arrangement. The business is concluded. Your enemies are handled. My family is safe. There's nothing left to bind us. Elowen, don't. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You got what you needed from this marriage. Alliance with my family's shipping empire. A wife who could play the role at galas. Someone convenient to rescue when your mistakes caught up with you. That's not... He moved closer and she finally looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in 3 days of stubble, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. He looked destroyed. That's not what you are to me. Then what am I, Mateo? She turned to face him fully. Tell me. Because for 2 months I've been nothing but a ghost in your house. A title without a life, just like you promised. You want to know the worst part? I could have lived with that. I could have played my role and built my own existence around the edges of yours. But you brought her here. You put your mistress on our property, in our home, and you chose her over me every single day. I know. She tried to have me killed. She sold your secrets. She destroyed your trust with other families. And you were so blinded by whatever debt you thought you owed her that you couldn't see what I saw from the first day I met her. I know. His voice broke. Elowen, I know. Knowing isn't enough. She picked up her bag. I need to leave before I forget that I deserve better than this. She moved toward the door. Mateo stepped into her path, and she expected him to argue, to command, to demand she stay. Instead, he dropped to his knees. The sight was so unexpected that she froze. Mateo Blackridge, the most feared mafia boss in Maryland, knelt at her feet like a penitent sinner. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his gun, the one he'd killed for her with, and laid it on the floor between them. What are you doing? I'm begging. His voice was raw. I'm on my knees begging you not to leave. Not because I need the alliance. Not because you're useful. But because somewhere between watching you burn your wedding dress and watching you command a room full of killers, I fell in love with my wife. Her breath caught. Mateo, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed whatever chance we had on our wedding night. I chose wrong every single time, and you paid the price. He looked up at her and his eyes were wet. But I'm choosing now. I'm choosing you. Not because you're convenient, not because you're strategic, because you're the strongest, smartest, most terrifying woman I've ever met, and I don't want to spend another day without you. You love me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Desperately, completely, in a way that makes me understand why men burn cities and start wars. He picked up the gun and held it out to her. This is yours, my protection, my loyalty, my life. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But if you stay, I'm yours. No more secrets, no more divided attention, no more anything that isn't us building something real. Elowen stared at the gun in his outstretched hands, at the man who'd broken her heart kneeling at her feet, at the choice she'd never thought she'd have to make. Stand up, she said quietly. He didn't move. Not until you tell me if I've lost you forever. She reached down and took the gun from his hands, feeling its weight. Then she set it on the dresser and pulled him to his feet. His eyes searched hers desperately. You broke me, she said. On our wedding night, you took every hope I had and shattered it. You made me feel worthless. I know, I'm sorry. I'm not finished. Her voice was steel. You broke me and I had to rebuild myself into someone who could survive in your world. Someone harder, colder, someone who doesn't need you. She stepped closer and he held his breath. But here's what you need to understand, Mateo. If I stay, it's not because you're on your knees. It's not because you finally decided I'm worth your attention. I stay on my terms, as your equal, as your partner, not as some prize you get to claim when it's convenient. Yes, anything, everything. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their capacity for violence. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. You'll spend the rest of your life earning what I'm giving you now. She covered his hands with hers. Trust, a real chance, the kind of marriage we should have had from the beginning. And if I fail you again, then I won't just pack my bags, Mateo. I'll take half your empire with me. Her smile was sharp. I've been studying. I know where all the bodies are buried now. He laughed, the sound broken and relieved. You terrify me. Good, you should be terrified. She pulled his hands down but didn't let go. Now tell me again, the part about loving me. I want to hear it when you're not on your knees. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, Elowen Blackridge. I love your strength. I love your ruthlessness. I love that you're smarter than me and not afraid to prove it. I love that you walked into a trap to make me see the truth. I love everything about you, and I'm sorry it took almost losing you to realize it. She kissed him, not gentle, not forgiving, but real. A beginning instead of an ending. When they broke apart, she gestured to her packed bags. Unpack those. If I'm staying, I'm redecorating this entire suite. It's too cold, too empty, not enough of us. Whatever you want. I want a lot of things, Mateo. She picked up his gun from the dresser and handed it back to him. But first, I want you to teach me how to shoot this properly. If I'm going to be a real mafia queen, I should know how to protect myself. His smile was genuine for the first time in days. Yes, ma'am. Subscribe if you believe real love is worth fighting for. Only manipulators like Nicolette won't.